people. My God. Hi, everybody. We're live. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
We were very insistent.
Yes, Radical Bacon. I'm here as some random producer to like make sure that Steve is on time. You can blame me.
And honestly, Geek, if you wanted to just take a step back, there's 3 or 4 other people that in the room right now that would be happy to just jump down my throat if it's 12:01. Why aren't we on the air?
For the time thing, I'm also here for the plugs and make sure we end on time, and also like get the links and stuff like that. And remind people charitylinks.page because might as well do that like early stuff like that. And there are also abortion resources in charitylinks.page, but also give money to Joanna Roberts, give money to Phoenix because I give her a lot already and it's not enough. Anyway.
Yes, and they're actually I should have added them to my description for this, but I forgot to. But they're in the charity link stock, the abortion resources. So yeah, for anybody who is after the events of Friday, if you're feeling like you need to.
Did something happen on Friday?
Yeah. I mean, you maybe missed it when half the population lost a basic human right in the United States.
Yes. All people with your
Facebook feed. Like literally every post on Facebook is about it.
Yeah. Except for as it should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and not every post, because let's not forget they also overturned Miranda.
Yes.
Oh, God, yeah.
That's a big one too. Because
this whole week it's been just
what a great ploy by the Supreme Court to overturn Miranda and then make us all completely forget about it.
They're just not gonna. They're not gonna stop until
it was the other way around. They were going to overturn Miranda and then do something that would spike protests. And guess what? Now the cops don't have to worry about who they said, who they get.
They're not going to stop until
everybody carrying weapons because they also opened up the concealed carry.
Yes.
I'm honestly not surprised by the Miranda thing, honestly, because like in the past, the Supreme Court has actually ruled that the cops do not have a constitutional duty to enforce rules like that. So
technically, they didn't overturn Miranda. They just limited
its scope.
The accountability.
You can't sue if they don't.
Very hard to enforce.
Right. Yeah, so the cops have like
the rights is not technicality, right?
Basically, you cannot sue the cops if they did not Mirandaize you. Essentially, they have less accountability.
Cops have no reason to Mirandaize you now.
Yes.
Well,
in fairness, like you have to. A lot of people don't realize that you need to be proactive in protecting your rights. Like if you say, well, I don't want to say anything that's going to incriminate myself, and then you keep running your mouth, guess what? They can use that if you say it.
You lawyer up and then shut up.
Yeah.
Well, the other Dana and I exchanged a couple of messages, but also with another friend of mine going into the protests, Friday night and Saturday. Like one of the things that it's important to remember is like, if you're going to a protest, any protest, frankly, organized or not, is memorize a local friend's phone number to bail you out. Who's not going to be at that protest?
Just watch. Give it another 5 to 10 years. They're going to have children working in factories again. Unless someone else, those other rules are like codified as it were, as like
have children working in factories again. They'll call it the Freedom to Work Act or something like that.
Exactly. They'll give it some inspiring patriotic.
And with the push to privatize education, that means that parents, if it's not required for children to be at school, well, what are we going to do? We can't just have kids on the streets. Let's give them the opportunity to work.
They'll be crowing about ending childhood unemployment.
The most common education.
You're talking about bringing the factories back to this country.
Never mind the fact that unemployment right now is the lowest it's been in more years than I want to count.
Exactly. Honestly, when like all those like fast food restaurants were closing down because they didn't have enough staff, Wisconsin changed the child labor laws that they had, where like it used to be like if you were like 16 and you have to you cannot be like at the place of employment by midnight. You have to like go home, and it's a law similar to in Washington State. I remember when I was like 17 and like still in high school working at a place. By midnight, I have to be off the clock, as it were. Or Wisconsin wanted to change the law so that that provision of like if they can't work beyond midnight was like removed, something like that, and also reduced the age to like 14. Since like instead of paying people a living wage, as it were, or which they can totally afford because these were major chains that were closing down like a Wendy's and stuff like that, not like a mom and pop Bob's Burgers or something like that. They just wanted to like hire children who doesn't know any better, and so will accept it like terrible wages.
And in Georgia, they're allowed to pay child workers less.
This is something I've heard people
when
say.
I was 14, I worked at a McDonald's in Massachusetts. And nowadays, in Massachusetts at least, that would not be permitted to have a 14-year-old working there. Now, I was not permitted to work in the kitchen. I was only allowed to work the registers, and somehow apparently the fry machine was okay. But,
the most dangerous part. The most dangerous part of the kitchen. You can work with the scalding hot grease. You can't put the burgers together though. That's
I know, but have you dealt with customers? Have you dealt with customers though? I mean, I'm not sure they're less dangerous than the fry machine.
Go ahead,
but nowadays, I don't think
The
14.
bit, the bit of the machine where you put in the burgers is legitimately more dangerous than the fry machine, but
But the point was that we had like, I think it was, you couldn't work past 9 or 10 if you were below 16. Nowadays, I don't think you can work unless you're at least 15.
It varies state by state.
But like it's changed since I was a kid. It's gotten more.
Let's keep in mind too, it's a blue state. And I mean, the whole blue state, red state dichotomy is only going to grow wider and more absurd.
And just a reminder to people outside the United States, red means communism, as it were, and blue means conservative. And it used to be that way in the 60s or something like that. It just switched at some point. Fox.
So like the TV stations just kind of randomly decided, no, let's make red the Republican color.
I think they did. I think
they did because if you go back far enough and watch like old news footage of election coverage from the 70s, you can still find like broadcasts where red stood for the Democrats and blue stood for the Republicans. I'm not sure exactly when it flipped.
2000.
Yeah. That's true. It is. Yeah.
If I can bring up something that actually came up just last night that's completely somewhat off topic here. I was watching, my girlfriend had us watch the 7-Year Itch last night, which I had never watched before. And I am surprised that the regular references to the interior designers on the 3rd floor made it to the Hays Code. I was just,
Tom Ewell was positively precious in that.
It's
amazing.
It's thinly veiled, so I guess they got away with it.
On the red state blue state thing, incidentally, my recollection is I'm sure this is a Googleable knowable fact. My recollection is that it was sort of random. They would just sort of randomly alternate year to year, and then in 2000 it was red for Republican, blue for Democrat, just randomly that year. But that was also the year when everyone was watching those goddamn maps for like a week and a half while everyone tried to figure out who had won the election. And so because it happened to be red and blue assigned that way in 2000, that stuck.
Yeah, I was thinking it was 2000 because of the Y2K phenomenon, and the world was going to end, so that was why it stuck. The computers got stuck on red and blue, and this.
So the computers literally got stuck.
That was the consequence of Y2K. Not the dates didn't change over.
They just stuck with red and blue. They couldn't change the color. They couldn't change the color after that.
Exactly.
I remember that election. I stayed up way too late following the 2000 election, and then overslept because of that and missed a stat exam. I walked in with like 15 minutes left, and the teacher the professor let me take it in his office afterward because of what had been happening the night before. He sort of just don't tell anyone, sort of a nod and a wink. I was able to take the exam after the class.
You foolishly thought you would know who the president was the night of the election.
Bush became president. He started
election, and they've all been garbage since.
So the Supreme Court started to politicize really more than it ever had before.
Yeah.
That was the beginning of the end for the Supreme Court.
We pretty much, I'm trying to think, other than 2000 and 2020, were those the only ones we didn't know the night of the election, like pretty clearly?
Yeah,
I think so.
At least, and I mean, certainly in my lifetime,
it depends. When I went to bed in 2016, things were, of course, you know, I turned into a pumpkin pretty early, and
I guess it depends.
So
yeah,
depends when you went to bed. I woke up and I was like, wait, what?
It was pretty late in 2016. It was like
I remember I remember going to bed that night. I remember going to bed 2016 and having at least the very strong sense that Trump had won, because I remember
I'm East Coast as well, and when I went to bed, like I was getting calls from my friends going, "We're going out drinking."
Oh yeah, I was getting texts from people, you know, like friends of mine, and even not even some close friends, but also just some folks that I just kind of know, you know, through YouTube and social media and stuff, that just wanted somebody to talk to, that were like literally spiraling because of the election.
I fell asleep crying that night.
Yeah,
I even recall going to sleep with the same sort of astonished, disbelieving feeling that Stephen Colbert had at the end of that broadcast.
Oh, I went and his live show.
Yeah.
Like,
where was he ending it? He's like, this is something that you've never anticipated could possibly happen.
I'm glad I went to bed early.
But honestly, you know what? That is a large part of the reason why Republicans always seem to win, because when it comes to getting their goals, they will back anything. If the Republicans run Jerry Sandusky for president, they would get behind him and defend him. Whereas on the left, Democrats, you can't unite behind Obama, you can't unite behind Sanders, you can't unite behind Warren. There's always this incredible purity test that you can't reach.
Republicans are dogs with bones, and Democrats are cats who get incredibly finicky about their food.
And can't be herded either.
Yeah, can't be herded.
Let's not forget, the queen of the Midway, Sarah Palin.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Well, the good news though there is with her, they've got ranked choice voting up there. So while she's leading in the polls, she's unlikely to win because she's not going to be enough people's second choice.
Indeed. I think there's also something to consider in many, and I hope that this doesn't seem a sideswipe, but the after action reviews of what we did or how we experienced the trauma of 16 and moving forward should be informing how we do politics today. I mean, it's one thing to look back and to recognize, you know, the shock of many. That's because I believe that the way people were sort of looking at politics and how they participate in our country's government was a lot more laissez-faire. And that sort of laissez-faire attitude has resulted in this 40-year triumph that the Republicans have turned out. So the point
they've been running the long game.
It's quite easy to bash, or that might be harsh. It's quite easy to look and categorize Democrats as feckless, toothless.
Well, they are
animals, but it might be better used this time to really look at what the hell do we want? Who do we talk to? Who are these people that we can easily make fun of? These people who were convinced that January 6th was a clarion call to action, that they're not aliens, they're us, even though I don't look like many of them. So the question is, how were they duped? They were duped by this extra arm of the government, Fox TV, that consistently, we've got to start looking at not just, it's easy to call names, but what the fuck are we gonna do? The earth has changed its spin. And if we keep dealing with this as though it was yesterday, we're gonna be fucked.
I want to interject, because in your studios, talked about way back in one of his earliest the alt-right playbooks. If you try to convince a Trump supporter that Trump is a white supremacist, you can run into one of three things: they can't be convinced, or they can but don't care, or they prefer that he's a white supremacist. Mm-hmm. So there's only so much there's only so much you can do of trying to de-radicalize a Trump supporter, as it were. I barely talked to my younger brother about politics, and even for me and my older sibling that have email exchange systems where we both can convince, I don't think there's going to be a wave that we can turn our Trump supporter younger brother into anything but a Trump supporter.
But that's not where our focus needs to be.
No, I agree.
And one of the things that I've had happen is for a couple of months now, our local county Democratic group has been trying to organize, get young people involved, because I'm not old, but I'm possibly the youngest member who's actively involved. There might be one other person who's about my age, maybe a little bit younger, that I know of. But so the younger part of our coalition is me, and so, but after really Friday evening, I started looking through my Facebook feed and then sort of identifying who had previously been a student of mine but had graduated, and sending messages saying, so I was wondering, and just as of this morning, I've got 12 people that I've sent messages to, and I've heard back, I think, from like 11 of them, and all of them that I've heard back from have expressed some interest, and I haven't gotten details, but it's been, people are talking about this. And so we can listen to, especially around here, where a lot of times especially me, like I don't think I've posted anything to my public feed about this, just because I'm already seen as someone who is too controversial. I've literally been told that. And, I'm in a position of authority, and I do represent the state, and I have to be judicious about, what I say, if I don't want to lose my job and lose my opportunity to connect with people. And of course I have to weigh that against, if I don't connect with people, then why am I bothering? But it's been a way to, especially in this area, connect people with each other, and to remind ourselves that we're not alone, and that we do have things for what we can do, and connecting with other people who maybe have not been involved because they feel like they're the only one. Finding other people who want the same things we do is really important. That's really, I think,
networking. Clarence Thomas, this is a gift that Justice Thomas has brought to all of us. And I'm not a fan of him or the current conservative court, but this is the strange bedfellows that is often spoken of, that politics creates, that when we recognize that women aren't just progressive women, they're not just Asian women, they are women. They are women. And then there are people who love women, whether you are heterosexual identifying or not. And then there are all of us. And and that's the hope. It was not and forgive me, Geek, that was an excellent point. I was not suggesting going out and converting or attempting to speak rationally to people who are in a moment of deep confusion and attempting to defend and justify a foolish mistake that they see. The point is for the rest of us who've been awake to actually say, who are you? What else is important to you? These things are important to me, and recognize that we can create not that same sort of robotic block that the Republicans have put forward, but an actual compassionate and, if you will, loving block where we actually consider those who don't look like us, who don't think like us, who've not been exposed to whatever it is but you're like Steve and Dana and all of you guys here in this tribe. I mean, we have the same concerns. We just want love and happiness and joy, the opportunity to express our dreams, to all of that shit. So this is not difficult, but it's going to require actual work. And I'm ready for it.
It's going to require action. It's going to require networking. It's going to require us to stand up and represent and to be, to speak out. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah. And to your point about trying to deprogram a Trumpian, I mean, it's the same model as trying to deprogram an evangelical. I mean, the old Peter Boghossian / what was his name, Andrew Magnabosco. It's possible. It sure as hell ain't easy.
I don't know how you would really do it, because people it's also like the Uber driver I had today. It's like, you really can't deprogram someone like that who literally, because it's like this ideal that it's my opinion or no one's opinion. So it's really impossible to do.
Yeah, you can't overturn emotion with logic. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
There's an old card. I got a card that ages and ages ago. I've long since lost it, but I never forgot what it said. And it said that it is impossible to debate a person who will not handicap themselves with an understanding of the truth.
Yeah.
or an understanding of the
I
facts.
won't confuse you with the facts.
Exactly.
I mean, before like,
you
go ahead.
can't convince people of the truth when the lie is what they wanted to believe in the first place.
Yeah. Julia.
I would, before writing this off as hopeless, I would suggest that if you want to take on the uphill slog of trying to nudge the marginal Trump supporter out of their dogmatic slumbers, if your opening gambit is, well, Trump is a white supremacist, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that's ineffective. I mean, they're the ones who say, okay, yeah, sure, but I like that. But they're not the marginal Trump supporter. The marginal Trump supporter, that's just going to sound so crazy and so disconnected from how they understand reality that you've sort of shot yourself in the foot, because they're going to
meet people where they're at. You have to figure out what's going to.
I can't do that.
You got to. I think you would have to start from a position a little closer to where they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
I don't think I'm capable of doing that, honestly. Because
well, I know. That's
you have to empathize a little bit.
I don't want.
I don't think you're the person to convert conservatives.
I tried. I have tried. I have.
Yeah, but that's
honestly.
I think the point is that an effective use of your time?
Oh
yeah. And effort. I mean, if you're spinning your wheels and you're not getting anywhere, you could be putting that effort to better use in other ways.
There are people who are so aggressive in how they go about it that they drive people away and then sound proud of it. And it's like, then you're not trying to convince anyone. You're just doing this for yourself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If you're driving people away through how you're approaching it, then you are not helping your position. You're helping the other one.
What if I start out by saying, why'd you vote for all those Nazis, dipshit? Is that a good opening?
Depends what you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to make yourself feel and sound self-righteous, congratulations. You're good at that, Steve.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's easily understandable to understand how someone got to their best belief. The question is, I'm not here to talk you off of your belief. My question is, why? Well, I want to understand. I'm not trying to my point is not to, if I'm ever in conversation with a believer in this, and hopefully it's not a rabid white supremacist, but the question isn't to dissuade you. The question is to understand. If this is around economics and a poor idea of economics, okay, I know that. If this is an idea about gender equality and what does that mean? What is CRT? All of these issues that were in one moment extremely frightening, but have faded away. Yeah. But then I want to understand what led you to the drug, not how the drug makes you feel. I don't care because I'm not for you. I'm trying to understand so that we don't recreate this. Oh, so we need money for education, Dana. We need money so that people can teach people to think critically. Okay, that's something. But why you are in the asylum, I don't care.
Even there, though, if you understand why they're in the asylum, then you can have a conversation with them ostensibly about why maybe a different approach to what their concerns are.
It's valid.
Is the right way to go.
You're not going to direct your way of thinking, but if you can make them at least question their own or start thinking about why, the idea isn't to make them think a certain way; it's to make them question why they think how they do.
I don't think they like to question how they think or why they do. I just know from experience. I know from experience trying to get people challenging their liberals trying to challenge their positions and their beliefs. I get pushback. I do. I get it from you, Steve.
No question.
Sure.
I would suggest automatically roll over and agree. Different than what we're suggesting.
I think part of the question has to be: is the pushback rational or is it emotional?
I get emotional. I sometimes do get emotional pushback. I do get emotional pushback. That's of course part of the problem.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's important to recognize that and engage with it in an effective way. And somebody who, you can. Essentially, you want to acknowledge that, and regardless, if you're trying to win someone over, first of all, if it's deeply felt emotion, it's not going to happen right away. It's a gradual process because it hasn't happened for them right away either. So it's not gonna, it's kind of like gaining and losing weight. It ain't, either way, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. But at the same time, if someone is responding emotionally, it's important to acknowledge and honor and respect and validate those emotions. And then also to consider, think about and look at those emotions and think about where they're coming from. Quite often it's from a place of fear, and those fears aren't necessarily rational. Feelings aren't rational, but there's always a reason for them. Something has caused them, and it's important to figure that out so you know how to respond to that person in a way that's effective. Now, again, that goes back to what I said earlier, Greek, which is that the best use of your time? Because like I said, it's a process.
And if I can just piggyback onto that, also I think the approach and your goals, when you look at Geek versus Carl, your approaches are going to be very different from how you're going to approach somebody. And frankly, I think Geek's much more likely to encounter resistance with his approach. But aside from that, I think your goals are also different, because I think, Geek, as you say, you're trying to absolutely change their view. Carl's view is to try to understand so we don't get more of them, and maybe then we can change their view.
That's okay. Back to that point that originally raised my hand to try to understand it. I honestly, I don't think there's need to be more than to be done, because Rebecca Watson has already put out the video that I just posted into the YouTube blind chat. I'll put into like our chat as of like studies to show that conservatives are terrified, and that's why they're conservative. They're just terrified. And what makes them terrified is irrational things as well. Like they're terrified of like being replaced or being a minority or like be these sort of things. And it's kind of like the thing is like they're kind of afraid of being the like oppressed class, as it were, because like they know what they are like, as it were.
But at the same time, that's an overstatement of it, because people aren't afraid of being an oppressed class. People are afraid that they're going to lose their job, or that people are going to be unkind to them. And those are legitimate fears. And you know what I mean? So it's understandable that someone who has a lot of power or a lot of wealth or a lot of resources might be concerned that they're going to lose some of that. That's okay. That's valid. But in some cases, yes, you should lose some of that, because that's healthy. Not just for everybody else. It's also healthy for you. I mean, as somebody who's taught Julius Caesar a lot, I talk with my students about how Brutus doesn't want Caesar to become king because it gives him too much power. It would make him a bad person. And so I ask my students to reflect on, well, if the people want Brutus to be king, how's he going to respond? He's a good person. And eventually I can usually guide them around to the idea that first of all, he doesn't want there to be a king. But second, he realizes that having that much power isn't good for him either. And so when we help people let go of some of these things that they're clinging to because they're unhealthy for them, we're actually helping them as well. They just don't always see it at first.
Brutus was an honorable man.
I was just going to say this. Joe, you've had your hand up.
Honorable man.
Somebody brought up the analogy meeting them in the asylum, I think. And it's kind of interesting because I work in mental health, and when dealing with people who are suffering from psychosis or delusions, our advice given to us is to not engage with them either positively, the delusions positively or negatively, but to just seek out how we can help without that. Like, for example, let's say somebody's saying that they can't sleep in their room because there is somebody in the dark that's going to get them, or somebody right outside the window that's going to get them. It doesn't help to say, just agree with them and be like, oh yeah, they're there, but they're not going to get you, or like, there's nobody there, man. Instead, you're like, okay, what can I do to make you feel safe? What can I do to help this? Just avoid, that sort of thing. It's kind of
what you're talking about is an adult interaction where you're trying to meet them in the middle, not going this way, not going that way.
And that only works when you're dealing with an adult who believes that you in some way can resolve their anxiety. But the distinction with the non-upper middle class privilege, they were working class and possibly impoverished white individuals, majority, who stormed our Capitol. So they've been sold an idea. It's just like people who buy a polo shirt by Ralph Lauren. The very idea is that this shirt buys me into an understanding. It buys me into a lifestyle. And you've got over 50 years of Ralph Lauren advertising what wearing Ralph Lauren polo means. But buying a polo shirt doesn't get you into the club, much like being white, which is the illusion, doesn't get you into a club of necessarily privilege. Every white boy is not going to be president. And every wealthy white boy who could be president is not hanging out with them poor white boys until they need their vote. And how do I get their vote when I'm not you and we don't have shared experiences? We're both white. This idea has to be eradicated, but you don't eradicate it from those who've been nursing on it by telling them you're crazy. You listen to what is the underlying, what's going on.
It's not necessarily irrational for that person also to feel that they are, well, as long as they're ignorant of the larger issues, it's not necessarily irrational for them to feel that they are not privileged. Because if they're a poor white person in this country, they don't feel, there's no reason for them to feel privileged until they take in the larger umbrella of the thing. But when you're struggling day to day, you don't necessarily get the opportunity to even look at it that way.
I agree. Capitalism wants people to just continue to struggle every day, so they ignore the bigger issues. Why do I care about like this car polluting the planet? I need this car to get to my job. What do I care about like this company's doing terrible things in the Congo? I have to buy this thing in order to like live and stuff like that. We were just talking about earlier in our previous chat about like how the Michaels was closed or like Joint Fabrics closed. So they need to get the horn for cornucopia. The only place I have to go to get a horn for cornucopia is Hobby Lobby, as it were. So capitalism kind of forces us to make decisions about our morals, that goes against our morals. But Nick Anderson has had his hand up there for a long time and been trying to get in. So Nick, I'm giving you the floor.
Okay, I was just trying to say, like, I forget exactly where, but there have been multiple polls lately showing that a majority of self-identified Republican voters believe in replacement theory. Everything that it's all projection. They think that all the other races of the world are bending together to take Whitey down a peg. They think that everybody wants to do what we did. That if whites ever become a minority, well then we're going to be the ones enslaved and rounded up into camps and exterminated because everyone's just itching to pay us back, right? Everyone's just as evil as we are, right?
I think they can't imagine the world outside of a us versus them, a winner and a loser.
Yes, these conservatives' biggest fear, biggest fear is that everyone's as bad as they are.
Yeah, right.
No projection.
I love what the sister just said a moment ago about this us versus them dynamic, this very binary way of experiencing the world. And I kind of break it up because I am a geek of Star Trek and Star Wars. This very idea that you can't find not just common ground, but love and passion and interests that are shared, that are far more important than the thing that I have been told I should be afraid of about you. And please don't get it twisted that Black identifying or other non-white people are not being fed watch them because they are not to be trusted. And we have the very same history that white people have, which is the history with the native peoples, the history with those humans that were enslaved. And so it makes better sense logically that if some shit was coming, it would be from the people who have been, if you will, sinned against, but that's not what's up. And there's no belief in the fact that I'm not trying to kill you because you don't, not you here in my tribe, those who have been swallowing this particular brand of Kool-Aid are so enamored and hypnotized by it that there's nothing else to consider. There are no other facts, which is why you have to secretly walk behind the votes of Americans to get them to lose a right, if you will, that was granted by our government, us, and is in our Constitution. This is stupid.
Carl, I have a question for you, honestly. Like, because I don't know you at all other than from a few interactions on here, but do you do you work in activism? Because you're very good at this. Like,
to say no, I'm a writer, and I've been for the last few years a caregiver to my mom who's got Alzheimer's. But
yeah, Carl, one thing I'd like to say as it comes to this, the one thing that you need to take into account in the midst of all of this is a thing I call social inertia. One of the things, in the midst of all of this, one of the things I'm reminded of, there was a piece that NPR did years and years and years ago on South Pacific, and one particular song in South Pacific, because you've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. That was in 1947.
Yeah, I got in trouble for that.
This is an arc that continues to this day. Yes. So the social inertia associated with this kind of pecking order, this kind of silly petty cat getting in the way, this kind
hierarchies,
of the necessity of being playing king on the mountain. It's almost certainly as old as mankind, and overcoming it is going to be a phenomenal effort, and it's going to take more focus than I've seen to date to do anything about it, because it seems to be an intrinsic part of human nature.
Hold on. I want to. Lauren, you said that there's always people trying to be on top of the mountain. That's where there's all these hierarchies there. What do you base that on? And then you also say it's a part of human nature. What do you base that on?
Behavior I've watched over the last 71 years.
It's not
universal, but it is sufficient. Okay. It is sufficiently prevalent that it basically, it spoils the apple barrel.
Because the thing is, because I just finished listening to the audiobook and read the Dawn of Everything by David Graeber and David Ringo, and they're kind of it's not always the case that there's always hierarchies. And it's always been a recent phenomenon that's been in states and all these sort of things. And it's some societies were hierarchical, but many societies were not. And so I just want to bring that up.
I would also point out that it goes in with what you said. You've got to be taught before it's too late. People learn, and children learn from the world around them that when you're a grown up and when you have enough power and you have enough money, you can do whatever you want. And if you have less power and you have less money, then other people get to tell you what to do, and you have to suck it up and take it, even if you don't like it. And so that's how it's just as reasonable to argue that that's how those hierarchies are perpetuated, is through learning them and being taught that this is the way it is, and this is what you have to do in order to protect yourself.
I feel there's a lot of there's human nature. So if there's one thing about human nature that I'd say that I would say it's adaptability, that we human beings, we can change to our detriment almost sometimes. So it's I'm hesitant to say anything about human nature because our nature is so all over the map. Where it's just
I would argue that you are saying something about human nature as well.
Well, I do think, I will say I disagree with Geek on a lot of stuff, but I do think it is, I agree that trying to justify a particular really anything, whether it's an argument or a form of government or a policy or whatever, by appealing to human nature is a dubious strategy at best, because human nature is so contradictory and
because we can
diverse
learn.
And we can learn, and because there are diametrically opposed qualities that are part of human nature. You know what I mean? Like we are we are greedy and selfish, but we are also charitable and selfless. That is that is within us.
We don't sometimes we like war, and sometimes we try to avoid war. So
I think there are minimal things you can say that are more or less universal. It's not that they're insuperable, but they're there to be supered, as it were. So you can say, well, people can learn to have.
Work out the English there. Sorry.
I thought he did fine.
You outside the family unit or whatever, but if you're asking people to sacrifice what they perceive as the interests of their immediate family for the interests of strangers, you can teach people over time to think that that's a thing that they ought to do sometimes. but it's going to be very, but that's going to be a heavy lift, and it's going to be, it's going to be sometimes. It's going to be real hard to get large groups of people to consistently privilege the interests of people far away who are strangers over the interests of their own children. And I think that is actually a pretty, you can say, yeah, that is human nature. If it weren't human nature, we wouldn't have survived very long.
I think some things. Go ahead. I think some things, evil things, have to be browbeaten into people. I mean, I'm not going to say that nobody out there is just bad, like a bad personality, but a perfect example I can think of is we'll keep in mind that Donald Trump's father basically groomed him to be this ultimate evil, greedy person, to beat any good out of him. But back in World War I, much of the time, our soldiers, even as the enemy was right in front of them, would purposefully shoot over their heads. It would make it look like they were shooting, but just missing, because they didn't want to kill the other guys. Because most humans, it's unnatural for humans to want to kill other humans. You have to train that into somebody. And we built a whole industry around it.
There's a great book about that.
Yeah. Well, a lot of this discussion kind of reinforces for me that it's not so much that the attempt to reach out to people who are maybe on the right and try to persuade them otherwise. It's not so much that is always a waste of time, although I do agree with what I think Carl was saying, that the value in doing that is more to understand how they got to that point so that we can maybe stop people, or as many people, from getting to that point in the future. It's like that's a very long-term project. Mm-hmm. And what worries me is when I see like short-term political strategists seemingly building campaigns around that objective of, well, we can win, but we have to turn some Republicans, when there's like a whole mass of disillusioned, disinterested progressives and leftists just kind of sitting over there.
Well, be careful that you're listening carefully to what they're actually saying, because in some cases it's about that we want to like flip some seats Republican, or flip some Republican seats
Democrat.
So to be Democrat. So they may be phrasing it that way, and again, some of that's on them for not clearly expressing what their strategy is. Mm-hmm. So when we want to flip some seats from Republican to Democrat, one of the ways that we can do that is by looking for which areas have a mix where there have been close-ish races that we've lost, and then pulling more, seeing what we can do to energize more disaffected voters in those areas.
Well, but I mean, I guess my point is, like,
get out the vote efforts in those areas.
Yeah,
as well.
Obviously, the if for individual, like for local elections or congressional elections, which are essentially local elections, strategies would have to be different dependent on the demographics of that individual district or what have you. But what bothers me is that it feels like the overall electoral strategy of the Democratic Party on a national level is, let's not do anything to piss off the Republicans too much because we want some of them to vote for us. And,
which to me is an absurd strategy, because
it's a waste of time.
Republicans. Who cares about them?
But I think go ahead, Nick. Go ahead.
It's because the way they're doing it, the way they're trying to compromise, is by flirting with rhetoric. Like, don't worry, guys, I hate immigrants too. And if you give them a choice between like half Republican, like Republican light, and full blown Republican, they're gonna choose the real thing every time.
Yeah. Steve and I have talked about this. If you're a Democrat who's trying to flip a Trump voter, what do you have to do to appeal to somebody who's already siding that far? How far to the right do you have to go? And is it even worth it? What are you standing for at that point?
But at the same time, sometimes Democratic candidates are misrepresented in what they're saying. So, for example, there are some progressives who have been dogging Stacey Abrams recently because instead of saying, all cops are bastards, she went ahead and said that in Georgia, she's running for governor of Georgia, and she said that one of the things that she'd want to do is make sure that police officers have a living wage. And there are progressives that I follow on Twitter who are saying, this just shows that she's a corporate Dem. And I'm just like, how is advocating for a living wage a corporate Dem strategy? And it's because you know, she's not advocating for, you know, complete defunding of the police, which is their, you know, something that they want. But, and they're talking about how, you know, in New York City, police officers regularly make more than $100,000 a year. I'm like, she's not running for mayor in New York. How is that relevant?
New York and Georgia are going to be two very different scenarios there.
Yeah, well, I mean, Atlanta also has a high cost of living. I think it's also about metropolitan versus rural. But you know, her point is well taken that, you know, while we still have police officers, it's important to make sure that, you know, we can, you know, that they're not worried about getting a ton of overtime so that they can feed their families. And they're exhausted and making poor decisions as a result. You know,
I mean, and there's also something to be said, frankly, for not saying something that's going to lose you the race prima facie.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, and the thing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Carl. No, go ahead. Carl.
Oh, thank you, Steve. I just wanted to say this, and thank you, Dana, for bringing that out. The very idea, because what comes up for me, and as how I hear what Dana just shared with us, is that we do, progressives, liberals, you know, Democrats, we do the very same thing that Republicans do, which is to take something, otherize it, and then say it has no value or worth. And to do that ends conversations. I have had deep difficulty with current policing in this nation. I broke the trance, or the trance was broken when I saw Mr. Floyd murdered in front of my face unexpectedly on television. And so I don't have any love for the police, but I don't want them homeless, hungry, without health, without any provision. And so does that mean that I'm with police policy? No, I recognize those are working people. Many of them, as angry as I am, or a Trump supporter might be, as hurt, as confused, they're human. So
yeah, all cops are bastards, but all cops are people too.
Yes,
and we're talking about
we train them to be bastards. Their entire training regimen is just being told everybody wants to kill you. Any moment something could happen to you. You can't take any risk. Your life is way more important than everybody else's life. And of course that affects how they work.
To understanding shades of gray and understanding there's more than you're with us, you're against us. You can support some aspects of it or the existence of the police and still think it needs reform, but it's sold as you support everything you do or you're absolutely against the police and their very existence.
The police are a white supremacist institution anyway.
Yeah, but yet you're still talking about issues where you're talking about maintenance issues, the maintenance of the personnel versus the policies that these people are trained under and what they're meant to represent.
Precisely.
The institution of the police is the problem. Doug Smith is a very great and wonderful person, but once he puts on the uniform, becomes Officer Smith, he cannot be a good person once his uniform is on.
But some of that is, I mean, and some of that is also because, but as a person, Doug Smith deserves to be able to feed himself and house himself and his family. And part of the problem with the whole, you know, defunding the police is that we're talking about. Part of the problem with the defunding the police is that we're talking about, you know, how we talk about doing that. And there are so many responsibilities that are being placed on police officers that they don't need to handle. A lot of communities that are reducing police responsibilities are handing off some of those responsibilities to community organizations and increasing social services. And so there is less need for police because there are other people who are more qualified for handling those positions. And Stacey Abrams isn't saying that we shouldn't do that. She's just saying people need to be able to eat. People need to be able to have safe housing. Everybody should have that. And that is a progressive point of view.
Right, so universal basic services. So like have those in place as well, so that like no one has to work any job in order to like eat, as it were. Universal basic services.
You're taking a step that's way beyond where we're at.
Right, but we need to get there. You can't just jump to that position.
I'd like to make a point.
Sorry, I have high standards.
Let Laura talk. What was
I'd like to. I think I've made this point before at another hangout. But here's the thing. My wife is a social worker. She's what's called an LISW, a licensed independent social worker. She doesn't just have her master's, or doesn't just have her bachelor's, she has her master's. She studied for a long time to be sufficiently skilled to be able to do the job that she does. Compare and contrast that with a police officer? How long is their training? How comprehensive is that training? And how much stress are they subjected to? I personally, I would love to see, at minimum, a bachelor's degree in the science and arts of law enforcement.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Why not? Why not?
Because it costs money.
Yeah.
Money
So,
money
because
that
and because if a cop isn't, if being a cop ceases becoming a job that you can get right out of high school, then that right there, that takes a huge chunk out of recruitment.
Yeah, and the few people that I know who have been police officers, who have been generally who've left the force, but you know, who are good friends of mine, they all have had bachelors in criminal justice. Because they come at it from a different perspective. They weren't, you know.
The thing is that the rule or the exception? I tend to suspect it's going to be the exception.
Yeah. Oh, I think
probably.
These were people who ultimately moved into doing something else because one, they couldn't stomach the police force.
Yeah.
And two, frankly, they could also make better money doing other stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. Azalea, you had your hand up. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah. Here in Eugene, there's this organization called Cahoots. I'm sure a few of you might have heard of it.
Yeah.
It's called Cahoots. It stands for Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets. And this is like it got attention after all this stuff because they specifically respond to mental health crises, ODs, and they'll help people. They'll take you places. It's like, and what's really cool is that the police love them. Like there's a story like here, there's Eugene and Springfield, they're right next to each other, and Cahoots expanded into Springfield at some point with one van. They've got just 2 or 3 vans roaming around, and there's like they got the social worker and the medic, I think, on the team. And for a while, the Springfield van had to shut down for maintenance or something like that. And the cops in Springfield had gotten so used to them being able to handle all those calls that when the Cahoots van went away for a while, they were begging for it back. So like this doesn't have to be an antagonistic thing. Like it saves the police department millions of dollars here.
It sounds like a wonderful cooperative.
And I've called Cahoots like for friends, like they're amazing people. Like I've worked for Whitebird Clinic, that's sort of the umbrella organization of Cahoots and other things. They're good people who really know what they're doing, and like it's more cities should have this. I'm amazed they don't have it more places.
Indeed. I mentioned it. I talked about it last year in a video, and I thought at the time, like, why isn't this like a standard thing around the country? I mean, I'm sure it doesn't solve every problem, but my God, what an improvement over the standard system, that most cities have.
Yeah, taking
same thing where if it doesn't solve all problems, then that's an excuse to not even try.
Yeah.
Reframing it, presenting defunding the police in this way allows it to be something that is helpful for police. It allows them to not have to try to do everything while not having the resources necessary to do all those things. And so, a lot of times, it is presented as an antagonistic way of looking at it, and it doesn't have to be.
Doesn't have to be.
No, but I think part of the problem as well, I mean, because I have heard Democrats, like Democratic politicians, make that argument that defund the police is not about, fucking cops. It's about reframing the system so that cops are responsible for the kind of things that they're good at. And when we create more resources and more organizations that are better equipped and better trained to deal with things like people who are in mental health crisis or people who are homeless, etc. When people call cops to come in to respond to a situation that really you don't need an armed officer there at all. But I think what happens is they get pushback against that from just Republicans who don't even hear anything they just said. They just they wind it right back to, they want to defund the police. And a lot of Democratic politicians or a lot of Democrats or their pollsters or their publicity people or whoever, they see that and they go, oh, okay, we're getting a lot of pushback on that. That's a losing issue. So let's not talk about that anymore. Let's pivot to talk about something else.
And it literally leads to actual harm because like for instance, I live in the middle of downtown Philadelphia. It's like not more than a couple of weeks ago, I saw somebody outside my window just laid out on the sidewalk in the sun. And I went out there to check on them. They were clearly passed out, clearly having some kind of like
episode of, some health episode, and they were African American. I was concerned about calling 911 to get this person help because of what the response might be, because I didn't want a cop showing up. I wanted an ambulance.
Yeah, you don't know who to call in that situation, because the people who might show up are not the people that would actually help
and I
them.
mean, I had a situation a couple of years ago where there was literally a fire in a trash can at the park. And I called, I literally looked up and called the fire department. Nobody answered. And so I knew, just because it's, that was a little bit concerning, more than a little bit, but I knew I called the direct number. I didn't call 911. And I called, I knew the police department building was next to the fire department building. It's like, well, maybe somebody could go over there and wake them up or something. I don't know. Because this was early in the morning. So I called the number for the police department and I said, I actually need the fire department, but nobody answered. And I just need somebody to come over here and check on the fire. And, my picture's frozen. And they sent somebody over, and they were also able to get a fire truck to come by and check on it. Because I mean, it wasn't anything super dangerous. I just wanted to make sure that, the ash, because it had mostly burned down, that the ashes were, taken care of safely and didn't present in a park, any sort of health hazard.
Yeah.
Thankfully, in my one case here, when I was on the phone with 911 with the dispatcher, I was like, I need an EMT.
I am specifically calling an ambulance.
And they responded and actually said, I understand, sir. We're sending an ambulance.
I'm not asking you to send any cops, okay? Do you get what I'm saying?
I did a cop to deal with a noise complaint, but they didn't help me that much.
So
go ahead, Carl.
Oh, thank you. There was something that came up about the putting forward the idea that defund the police, who it's not registering with this sort of level of the population that it needs to. If I'm going to go on, rather than saying this is what this means and this is what we are not saying, and that is a lie. So Representative so-and-so, who just said defund the police means this, is lying. That's not what we are saying. And so therefore, this is what we are proposing is a simple response. And I also want to say this, that Steve and Geek, let alone all of us, are doing the thing that we consistently are saying is not possible. Steve said a moment ago, I don't agree with a lot of what you put forward, Geek. That's not my rhythm. That's not my jam. But you see, they have a loving friendship. They're not angry at one another because of these differences. It's like kinetically tracking the neurons it takes to, when you're sitting on your commode, move your arm to the toilet paper, pull it back, wrap it. I mean, you don't even think about these things. We do them automatically. This is not rocket science. This is called listening to someone. This is called asking a question. This is called getting an understanding. And then if you can't do any of that stuff, my conversation is ended, because the point isn't to persuade or dissuade, but to connect with you.
Yeah.
I want to hear Steve talk about his vibes.
I almost thought that was the toilet paper in this scenario. I was so confused for a second.
Didn't Nick have something to say?
Yes, Nick, you read the final.
It's okay.
Okay, so
if anybody has final things they want to get in, go ahead, because it's almost the top of the hour, and I'm going to wrap this goddamn stream up at the end of the hour.
I want to jump in real quick.
I have a thought, Steve, which is
Zelia, go ahead.
Yeah, just there's all these people who disagree about what the final stage should be. Should we eventually have a smaller transformed police force, or should we abolish it? And what I'd rather focus on is what we can agree on now, because so many of those questions can't even be answered until we're closer to it. We can't. I feel like right now we can't imagine what an ideal society would look like, because we're nowhere close to it. But we can do things together. For me, it's like abolition isn't a goal, but a process.
Indeed.
Finding where we can, finding where we can agree and doing those things, and then assessing from that situation and see if we can agree on further. So
everything's work in progress. Nothing happens overnight.
Well, and
so
yeah, go ahead.
I got that from Non-Compete. Great channel, by the way. Kind of the idea.
I like non-compete. He's anarchist too, but like as his partner Luna Oi is also like not an anarchist, Marxist Leninist, and so they can like marry and get along just fine. So like it's definitely possible. So if there are any other, like Dana has her hand up.
I wanted to say that I did go ahead and put the links in my live stream description from yesterday, and so I really want to encourage people to support progressive candidates. So there are some links to people these are specific Senate races, ones that have a Democratic candidate. So even if you can't send money, that's absolutely fine. If you can't vote, that's absolutely fine. You can follow them on social media and boost their messages. That's a great way to support them. And it takes very little time and it takes no money whatsoever, aside from, I guess, your electrical bill and internet, which you're paying anyway, because you're here.
Can I add a final thought?
Sure. Yeah, please. Absolutely.
Loving strange new worlds. That's it.
Oh, yeah. Right there with you. Right there with you, my friend. Oh,
I got into a good deal of that myself, and there can be no doubt that Anson Mount may be the best captains possibly since Kirk.
He is he's becoming one of those actors that he's been so good in this season that I'm like, God, this dude is too good for Star Trek. Like, where has he been?
Makes me question my lesbianism. I'm like,
he's so good, and he's been like he's done stuff before. He's done stuff before. He's been in shows and movies and stuff. Like I've always thought of him as a good actor, but he's so good as Pike. And then when he gets his chance to do like other stuff, like in the most recent episode where he's playing like the Chamberlain in the fairy tale, and he's
exactly.
He's so good.
It was a complete change of type for him, and he was hilarious.
He's so good. He's so good. I'm just like you're too good for Star Trek, brother. I mean, I'm glad that we've got him. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad that we've got him. But oh my God. Okay, Joe, you had your hand up.
And as a person who lives in a state that has a pre-existing ban on things, support out-of-state camping, and that you just don't talk about afterward.
Yes, exactly.
And support organizations that are set up to help with that, because a couple of the organizations I left links to in my last live stream are specifically oriented toward reaching out to people or providing resources to people who need to go out of state, and making sure that they have the support that they need in order to do that. So that's absolutely.
As well as support for access to contraceptives and comprehensive sex education, which is the best way to reduce unintended pregnancies, and therefore the best, and also research shows the best way to reduce abortions, if that's actually what we're talking about.
Precisely. If I could just add
early and often.
If I could just add one last thing, because I think on that point, people are talking about that they're coming for contraception, they're coming for gay marriage, and they absolutely are. Yeah. But just because Clarence Thomas is being a self-serving fuck does not mean they're not coming for Lovey as well.
It's all on the table.
Among others,
it's all on the table. Yeah, it's all on the table. Yeah.
So I've done all the pitches, and I'll go through the pitches again. So it's just Alchemy later today, in about less than an hour, we're going to have our friend Joey the Indigenous Heretic on, because there is a South Dakota hotel that's banned Native Americans, and Joey's Lakota, Joey's Lakota is that's how we got North and South Dakota from the Lakota. We took their lands, the Black Hills, we made into Mouth Road with those ugly white supremacists on. So that's going to be an interesting discussion. Go through the rest of the pitches. Nick Anderson has a comic called Planet Ripple. Go to planetlyrical.com. You can read the first volume for free.
I started to work on volume 8.
Yes,
just a few days ago.
You can support Nick Anderson on his Patreon. You can buy Nick Anderson's comic from itch.io if you don't want to buy from Amazon. Example, Nick has a YouTube channel, Nick on the Planet Purple.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's the last of your pitches. Isaiah Terrace, he has his own YouTube channel called Sinister Intelligence. Go check out Isaiah Terrace. John Brockman is not here, but he's part of another podcast, Dungeons and Bacos. Heck, a lot of fun, very different. This Serious Mind is in the live chat, and he has his own YouTube channel. Then Nicole has their own YouTube channel. Then Nicole Dares, go and check it out. Some Random Geek has a Twitch channel, a YouTube channel, and a Twitter. You can follow there if you want to. Our friend Matthew Datchard also does read some audiobooks of LibriVox.com, so you can check out his links there. And finally, charitylinks.page. Charitylinks.page. Yes, please check out all those abortion resources that Steve has posted in the description today, as well as last Friday, are also in charitylinks.page. But also give money to Joanna Roberts, give money to Phoenix, and thank you all for coming. Steve, what do you have prepared?
Are you turning my stream back over to me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Patreon.com/Steve Shives, or become a channel member by clicking the join button if you want to support my stuff here on YouTube. I'm not sure if we're recording a new podcast with Jason later today or not. I haven't heard from him. If you saw Jason pop up in the live chat on my stream Friday night, you know that he has COVID. But
mess up, people.
But he is feeling better. He's not all the way better, but the last time I talked to him, he said he had been improving. So I don't know if we're going to be able to record today or not. But the Let Me Listen podcasts are also linked in the video description. Dana and I are both on Ensign's Log, and Jason and I together also do Late Seating, the movie review podcast, where if we do record today, we will be recording our review of one of my favorite movies ever, There Will Be Blood. Which you'll get to listen to next week when it comes out. But if all goes according to schedule, which it may not, I'm not sure. But anyway, so that's it for the stream. Isaiah, you had something to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, have you told Jason about the fanfic that I do with some of the late seating stuff?
I think I did. Yeah, I think I did, and he was amused. I think he had the same reaction I did, which is one of the things that makes me love the idea so much, which is, of the two podcasts we do together, that Late Seating is not the one you would expect people to do fanfic of, but that's the one you write fanfic of. And I just think that is beautiful. I love that. So he writes fanfic for the movie review podcast. Yeah.
Now kiss.
For example, I did a late seating review of the movie The Blind Side.
Man.
One of the worst late savior movies ever. And I would say, I would parody Steve saying I fucking hate this movie. Everyone's boring. Everyone's a cliche. Yeah. It's fucking.
It's saccharine.
It sounds like you've got it pretty spot on. It's just, I remember that when Sandra Bullock won Best Actress for that, I remember I was thinking it was something like, aren't we past this? Why are we still making movies like this and giving people awards for movies like this? I feel like we've gotten past this, but apparently not. We're still doing it's about racism, but white people are the heroes. Okay.
The Green Book, we still make it today.
Green Book, yeah. The Help.
And what this movie was? It was a zeitgeist film because Obama was the president, and everyone had thought, racism is over. Let's make a movie about the end of racism.
White people, we were feeling good. We were like, we ended racism, everybody. Let's celebrate.
And then we packed it and went home, and look at where we are now.
Yeah.
And then the guy made Get Out. I forgot his name.
Yes. All right. Thank you. By the way, thank you, CMAC, for dropping that in our private chat. Yes, I need to end the stream. So anyway, that's what I'm going to do.
This time.
That's what I'm going to do. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next month.
See you, Steve.
Bye.